This conference will now be recorded.
Device was used. I'll let you get on with your meeting.
Before we begin, there's another caller on the line. I just want to make sure that's not another member of council. If you've called in, if you can mute yourself, unless you're a member of council, you know the drill. I'm going to assume that's a member of the public, and I will go from there. I guess I'll turn it over to you. Sorry, Deputy Mayor Milne. You are muted, Deputy Mayor Milne.
Yeah, Clint will point out, yeah, that's 2 today, but only 1 per meeting. That's like, there's ways of measuring this. Anyway, sorry about that. Thank you. So we'll call the meeting to order. Can I have a motion to confirm the agenda as presented? Barb and Martin, thank you very much. Oh, thank you. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. Is there any declaration of interest, pecuniary or otherwise, related to any item on today's agenda? Not hearing any. If one should arise during the course of the meeting, feel free to declare it at that time. We need a motion to resolve into committee of the whole. Be it resolved that council recess a special council meeting at 1:32 and move into the committee of the whole meeting to allow for fuller discussion regarding housing and density. Should that be housing density, not just density? But anyway, could I have a mover of that motion, please? Martin, seconder. Barb, thank you. Any discussion? Any opposition to that motion? That is carried. Thank you. Now we need to appoint a chair. Would someone like to nominate someone to chair the meeting? Committee of the whole meeting.
I'll nominate Brian Millen.
Thank you, Michael. Barb, are you seconding that?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any other nominations? Not hearing any. I'll call the question. All those, is there any opposition to that motion? Okay, you're stuck with me then. This could be a while. Thank you very much. Delegations and presentations. The first one we have today is Stuart Reed from the Community Foundation, Grey Bruce. I don't see Stuart on this. Oh, Dave.
He's trying to hook up. I've got them on the phone. They're just trying to, I think they maybe got a wrong meeting link. I'll be breaking.
Oh, see, Dave, you're muted. Somehow you muted yourself there. That's one. Do we want to wait, Madam Clerk, or should we?
I think Dave muted himself intentionally because he's trying to give instructions.
Right.
Stuart, are you on the line? I do have 2 callers on the line.
That might be me, Lindsay. I lost you and I called back in there. I just got back on here.
Okay.
I don't know how that works or not.
No, yeah, I have you, but I still have 1 more caller, but if that's not Stuart, then he must still be trying.
Well, we'll just give them a minute to try to sort that out.
Yep. Dave,
we don't have it.
Dave appears to be on the phone with him, I assume.
Yeah, we don't have any other delegations, do we? No.
No.
Okay, well, we'll just wait a minute.
Maybe in the meantime, Clint could report on the, I believe Clint is on the line. Yes.
Yes.
Report on the densities.
Report on which number is that, Dave? There's a number of them here. 7713, is that the one that, yeah? Is there any objection to that from the council? Oh, wait.
I see Stuart was on there now.
Stuart is in the building. Good morning, sir. How are you this afternoon, Stuart?
I'm good, thanks.
Excellent. Yes, we can. Thank you. So I have introduced you. You're presenting on the Vital Focus on Housing report. if you're ready to go, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Terrific, thank you. Is it possible to share my screen so that I could walk you through the report?
I'm going to say it's entirely possible, but I can't tell you how to do it.
We've made you the presenter, Stuart. You should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, great.
There you go.
Okay, and I just need to find my file here. How about that? Can you see now?
And so, yep.
Great. So thank you for having me here today, and it's my great pleasure to tell you a little bit about our Vital Focus on Housing report that we released very recently to the community. And this is a culmination of a couple of years of work of data gathering on the well, very fast-changing housing crisis in Grey Bruce. And I want to acknowledge that our Vital Focus work is really, it's a collaborative action. We have representation from many of the major social service and health agencies on our Vital Signs Advisory team. And they really point to reports and information and trends that we are able to gather and bring data together to formulate into to this report. The gesture of Vital Signs is to really take sometimes complex data and turn it into a very user-friendly, accessible format, so that the goal is that maybe this report will land on coffee tables across the region and really prompt conversation amongst families and individuals about you know, what's happening in terms of housing, and perhaps also to enlighten them about the perspective of people who may be left out of the housing situation or in housing precarity as well. So I've got the report up on the screen. So that attractive, accessible quality is something we're striving for. We've had the benefit of some wonderful photography by John Fearnall of Good Noise Photographer, who works up in our region here, and his photographs populate the report, and might be neighborhoods or parts of Grey Bruce that you recognize as you move through the report itself. In everything we do, and I'm sure Southgate Council does this as well, we acknowledge the keepers of the traditional territories, the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, and the peoples that were our forebears here on Grey Bruce and are still active and active land stewards. We also have a message from the foundation to open up the reader's entry into the report, and we talk a little bit about what the foundation does in terms of its work in philanthropy, and we leave a little bit of a call to action as well, because people reading this report wonder, well, what can they do? So we draw attention to our Next 25 fund, which is a initiative to empower the foundation with more non-restricted reserves in years to come, so that we're better able to respond to community need as it arises and help out with community issues such as the housing crisis that we're facing. The report gleans from the data that we're presenting some of the big points that, you know, takeaways that we're dealing with here. And on this page, we talk about very generally, you know, what is in the report that's salient to people here is that, you know, the secret south, that Grey and Bruce counties are highly desired areas to live now for migrants from the GTA, and that migration is really causing housing prices to climb higher and higher. What we surmise from the report is that the housing crisis is not just the problem of people who are economically disadvantaged anymore, that it's really affecting all economic brackets, and even the middle class that we've traditionally referred to are experiencing lack of housing options and lack of housing stock. And through the report, we also look into the situations around vulnerable people in our community, and we find that supports for homelessness or people that are in housing precarity need to be improved to really address the issue. We also talk about equity, and we found that not everyone has equal access to affordable housing, so that is a challenge that we need to face together as well. And on a positive note, the summary is that the way to forge solutions is really through collaboration and partnership. So we we come away from the Vital Focus Report with an understanding that it's really through collaborative initiatives that engage government, developers, the social services, health agencies, and the philanthropic sector that we're going to find ways to address the lack of housing that people are experiencing. We also set out in the report, people think, well, what am I supposed to do with this information? And we really prompt people to action in terms of starting conversations with their friends or neighbors about the situation that they're reading about. If they printed out one of our reports, it is available for download on our website. We encourage them to share that paper with someone else, so pass it along to a friend or a family member. A lot of the things that they read about that may prompt them to dig in a little bit deeper to find out more, and we encourage people to sign up for, newsletters and forums, and to follow the foundation on social media or Facebook to remain as part of the conversation that's rolling along. People can also share their time or resources through volunteering or getting involved more directly with some of the agencies that are addressing housing. And so we refer people to 211, the call-in line, which can put them in touch with agencies that might welcome their volunteer hours as well. And to contacting the foundation to maybe get engaged as a volunteer, an ambassador, or to stay apprised of the situation as it rolls along. And the report's also landing in a double election year, which I know you're so very much aware of. And so we really encourage people to perhaps use this as a primer to come up with questions or conversations with their candidates in their local ridings to really put housing on the table as a topic of conversation in this time when we're choosing our decision makers that are going to be dealing with things in months to come. So this report was also informed by a vital conversation we hosted in December 2021. And at that time, we had about 80 people on a 2-hour online conversation, and we had 4 speakers with informed speakers about the housing situation and a lot of breakout rooms. And we had scribes in the breakout rooms taking down notes about what people were experiencing. And we really tried to listen and to garner insight from what people were saying that they were experiencing in their own lives. And a lot of that is reflected through the report. We took key themes from those conversations in the breakout rooms, and they're listed under each of the issue clusters. And we have little speaker spotlights to draw attention to the folks that came to speak to us to prompt conversation on that day. So not all the perspectives we're sharing are found in data. And back in the opening pages, we also talk about the way that data is always about averages and summaries and big numbers. And sometimes not everyone participates in the census, or not everyone sees their numbers reflected in the data that we're using. So in our report, we try and share community storytelling as a way of expanding people's understanding of the crisis, apart from the big numbers, and really looking at how our community is responding in creative ways to some of the challenges we're facing. We also are layering on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This is the first time with one of our vital signs reports that we're referring to the SDGs. And these are 17 goals that were formulated by the nations involved in the United Nations. And Canada has made a commitment to meeting these goals by 2030. And community foundations across Canada are very much a part of that collective action. And so what we do is we introduce the SDGs, and then in each of the issue clusters that appear through the report, we refer back to how this issue is responding to one of the 17 goals. And hopefully it's a new way of, for us, of linking our work locally with a global effort for a more sustainable planet and a more peaceable and equitable planet. And so it's something that we're going to hear more and more about in years to come. We open the report with just some general regional stats about population and about growth in our region. The pieces of note, between 2016 and 2021, the population of Attainable Mountains increased by 34%. Southgate, here we go, has increased by 19%. and Saugeen Shores by 16%. So some of our regions in Grey Bruce are some of the fastest growing and quick changing communities in the country. Over there under rapid growth, you can see in 2021, Owen Sound, Port Elgin rated 9th on the U-Haul top 25 list of Canadian growing cities as well. We also up here open up a little bit of a discussion about some of the terminology we're using to talk about housing, and the word affordable is bandied about, but people don't maybe understand exactly what affordable means. And according to the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corp, it is a household defined by spending less than 30% of its total before tax income on housing is affordable. So when you tip over that 30% mark, it's not affordable anymore according to that. And there's also some definitions related to the terminology we use around adequate and suitable as well. So I mentioned these clusters. So working through the data, we kind of defined four sort of main areas of concern or issue clusters. And those are affordability and availability, equity in housing, living standards in housing, and well-being in housing. And that's how our report is divided up. So we start off with affordability and availability. And so you can see we drop in the SDGs here, and we give a little bit of an editorial summary about what the data was showing us. So a lot about the skyrocketing costs and a competitive sales market that is really causing people not to be able to find suitable housing for themselves. Selling and moving are not an option when housing stock does not meet demand. And a little bit of the challenges around zoning rules and bylaws often are barriers to creative low-income housing solutions like trailers or tiny homes. So thinking differently about planning for municipalities in response to the challenges. And commodification of housing means that short-term rentals are seen as profitable investments, and they deplete the stock of long-term investments. And we hear about that again and again about the infiltration of things like Airbnb and people buying up properties as an investment potential rather than living in them, and something we're all aware of here. Also on these issue pages up the side, we've kind of clustered words that relate to what affordability and availability means for us in terms of the way we group the data. So it's about rent versus own, market price, vacancy rates, and the next page you'll see it continues, lack of stock, variety of options for people as well. This page, as I mentioned, reflects a little bit of the vital conversation, what we heard in those conversation rooms, and a feature on Christine McDonald, who was one of our keynote speakers. So some really great things we heard, you know, from people. New builds seem to focus on a desired lifestyle, single family detached homes, regardless of the demand for smaller and affordable homes. Individuals cannot live or age in the same communities as their family and friends when there are no affordable options available to scale down. Really very straight ahead truth, and we hear about this again and again. People, maybe elderly people that are aging are in, you know, a large home with 4 empty bedrooms because there's nowhere for them to shift to a more scaled down lifestyle within the community that they're seeking to live in, to be close to the family and friends that are going to support them as they age healthfully in their community. And then each cluster has a bunch of facts, and there's usually 8 or 10 of these, and often they're kind of shocking and hard-hitting. There is also a data source document that we released in tandem with our Vital Focus on Housing report. So the data source document is also available on our website, and that is all the data that we found during our research. And it lets people that are interested in finding out where that statistic came from drill right down to the source report. So a great tool for people that want to do a bit of a deeper dive. So on this facts page, and I'm sure these are not surprises to you, you know, in 2021, the Realtors Association Grey Bruce report comprehensive annual average price was $650,944, an increase of 35% over 2020. So really scaling up in the last year. Compared to Ontario and Canada, Grey and Bruce counties have more owned dwellings and fewer rental buildings than other communities in Ontario. In Bruce County, 29% of all renters are in core housing need, so in need of upgrades, different types of housing to meet their family requirements. And then the storytelling. So each cluster also is embedded with stories about adaptability, about creativity and change. And we talk about the Spark Housing Initiative up in Tobermory, where the meeting place is really talking with landlords about making sure to maintain long-term leases in the community rather than just responding to the vacation summer rentals, and making sure there's places for people to live year-round in Tobermory. And we have a couple of stories about Southgate and Saugeen Shores, and your responses and creative responses, which I think are going to inspire other communities that may be reading the report too. So a little bit about the Housing Task Force and the proactive nature of initiatives in both Southgate and Saugeen Shores. We also talk a bit about habitat, and you probably heard about the wonderful work they're doing building many houses on Saugeen and Niashiniming, and also some really innovative work where they engage the 4-County Labor Market Planning Board and youth who are trying to develop job-related skill sets, and brought youth up to work on the building sites to learn hands-on on the job about how to build houses, kind of a win-win for young people as well as for Habitat, having that manpower to help them with their builds. Then the next cluster is about equity, and running up the side here about fairness, about equal access, age-friendly, about diversity, ethnicity, sexual orientation, how people are able to access, have fair access to housing. So, and we relate the SDGs here: gender equality, reducing inequalities, and sustainable cities are the 3 SDGs that we identify associated with this cluster. And it starts off in the little editorial, housing a basic right for all people. Barriers to accessing good housing can also make our community less than welcoming to newcomers and immigrants. So being a welcoming community means we need housing stock and places for people to live in healthy situations. And a little bit about the economics of equity as well, and how people can be priced out or shut out of access to housing because of their own economic situations. And here from the key themes, we had a speaker from Mawikwadong, Diane Giroux, who runs Giway, which is all about Indigenous housing support and building better relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous organizations in Grey Bruce. And not surprising either, finding available housing that accommodates the needs of seniors or people living with a disability is difficult. So, just setting that out there. It's not always easy or simple for people, depending on their own situation, to find housing. People with lived experience need to be engaged in conversations about affordable housing solutions. And we heard that again and again too. Not about us without us. We need to engage people with lived experience in our solution making, and make sure they're at the table as we come together to talk about the collaborations and partnerships that are going to make for progressive change. And the facts in this section about equity, again, are pretty hard-hitting. Sets out the ODSP rates for single people, couples, and a couple with children, and you can see, with our knowledge of local rents, how inadequate those numbers are for supporting a family and that's looking for housing. And also about the shame or social exclusion that can come with living in inadequate housing that further isolates people experiencing marginalization, including children living in low-income circumstances and people with mental health issues. And maybe a little bit surprising over here, women are those with below average well-being tend to be women, younger, living on their own as part of a couple or with children at home, working at multiple jobs and with less job security, living with a chronic illness or disability, and they're more likely more likely to be spending more than 30% of their income on housing. And that's supported by data from the call-in centers related to shelter from domestic abuse, and also the 211 calls in the region where they identify housing as the primary need. And then we have some stories, some really interesting stories. Mawikwadong, the Native Friendship Center in Owen Sound, has been doing some work with Giwe, which is fostering those new relationships I was saying about Indigenous, non-Indigenous groups, and also talking about housing from an Indigenous perspective. And this little article talks a little bit about the Jesse Thistle definition of Indigenous homelessness, which differs from the commonly understood colonial definition of just having a roof over your head, because to Indigenous people, home relates to family and community and a strong connection with the land as well, not just the building structure. So kind of expanding people's perspectives about the crisis and about the crisis of belonging and inclusion that we see in Grey Bruce as well. Little blurb on the work the Poverty Task Force does too. Great organization that is really tackling issues around homelessness and poverty in our community. Then we move into housing and living standards, and what we learned is that housing is really a cornerstone in living standards and conversation about work, about transportation, about food security, the cycle of precarious living. It all relates to housing as a core element. In here it says, with the cost of rent and housing so high in Grey and Bruce counties, more income is spent on shelter, leaving less for life's necessities, including food. So big concern. And the SDGs here: no poverty, zero hunger, and I think, well, it's so tiny it's hard to read. Right work and economic growth. So about plugging people into work. And we're hearing this again and again, that housing is a big impediment to people shifting to our region for work, because they can often find a job, but there isn't affordable housing within a commuting distance of the place that they may choose to work. And key themes from our vital conversations. And again, no surprises here. Wages, particularly in the tourism and service sectors, are not increasing to reflect the market rates of housing. Vehicle ownership is required for rural living. Affordable housing is typically not built near to services or stores, and this limits housing options available to those without reliable transportation. And we have a speaker spotlight from Erica Phipps, and she was one of the researchers from Queen's University involved in the Rent Safe Owen Sound project, which was looking at the situation of tenancy in this city. And really, we found a lot of content in their final report that related directly to the housing questions and is reflected in this document. Oops. There we are. And the facts in this housing section. Again, pretty hard hitting. Over 15% of homeowners and 50% of renters in Bruce and Grey spend more than 30% of their monthly income on shelter costs. So that's really indicative of that takeaway we started off with. That, you know, this isn't just the problem of economically disadvantaged anymore. That's really affecting the whole spectrum of life here. And, you know, real hard hitting numbers here from United Way. Looking at the cost to a family for a $1,500 a month one-bedroom rental, a household has to earn $60,000 a year, or $32.96 an hour, with a 35-hour work week. And, you know, with our understanding of the market here in Grey Bruce, that those are high numbers and difficult for people to support. And the more we learn, you know, the $1,500 a month is kind of a bargain compared to some of the other stats we're hearing back about rentals in our community too. And going into some storytelling, a little blurb about Glassworks, the cooperative that's purchased land in Owen Sound to create an eco-village and multi-dimensional living and working situations for people. So really a very creative new ideal that that this group of volunteers is forging, and we watch with great interest about the development of Glassworks. And then a little blurb about the United Way's ongoing work to support people with their utilities and helping them with financial literacy and dealing with the complexities of renting or owning a house and forging sustainable living standards in this contemporary climate. And then we move into well-being. This is I think our last cluster. And again, the SDGs, good health and well-being, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities. And in this section, we really look at holistically how housing relates to people's sense of security, inclusion, belonging, their mental well-being, as well as physical access to green space and adequate food, all of those things, and a healthy apartment or a healthy home free from mold and any kind of situations of physical inappropriateness as well. So factors that make the home happy include proper heating and cooling, clean water, healthy materials, as well as easy access to outdoor recreational spaces, arts and culture, and healthcare. So acknowledging, holistic well-being, housing is a big portion of that and is absolutely key to having a healthy community. Some of the things from the Vital Conversations: low vacancy rates prevent tenants from addressing housing issues or inadequate living standards with landlords, as eviction would leave them with no place to live. So in this market where there's so few options for people, they really hesitate in raising issues about repairs and tend to put up with inappropriate situations because there's very little option to them. We also had a speaker spotlight on Kime Ip, who was one of the lead researchers on the 4 County Labor Market Planning Board's Precarious Living Series, and there's a little section on that coming up. And also about the huge uptake in food kitchens and meal supply through the Owen Sound Hunger and Relief effort, and a little bit about their increase to hundreds of thousands of meals since the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, sorry. And then facts. Well-being also encompasses homelessness, and so we have some summary statistics related to the recent homelessness enumeration that took place in both counties. And we also know that homelessness is not a simple situation either, that there's often great complexity and other mitigating factors in people's sense of well-being. So having a medical illness or condition, having a physical limitation, have a learning or cognitive limitation, mental health concerns or substance use always influences people's situation related to homelessness. And the vast number of households that are affected by homelessness, 142 in Grey County and 77 in Bruce. And a little bit about some other forms of precarity. United Way with the Y has distributed over 9,000 meals to families that are sheltered in motels just in the months between April and March of 2021. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. Here we go. And then we have a bit of a feature on the 4 County Labor Market Planning Board's Precarious Living Series, and I really urge people that are interested to go to their website and to read the case studies that they have charted about how housing relates to other influences of precarious living and poverty. And they were very generous with us and let us excerpt a small portion of one of the case studies about Robert, who is an Indigenous fellow, how facing housing insecurity and some of the other factors that are at work in his life. I should say we've launched our report online, and that's for green concerns rather than printing a lot of them. We're really urging people to read it online or on their phone. And all of the links that you see here are hot links, so you can tap through and read more to some of the websites that we are referring to. So it's a great springboard to some other reading about the housing situation. We also talk a little bit about the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay, who are a think and do tank who have been doing a lot of work and and research into the commodification of housing and how it's affecting our region. And they're working on a toolkit for municipal leaders. They're developing glossaries that kind of help people understand the terminology and talk about the situation. And they're involved right now in a lab with Social Innovation Canada that is looking at systems that are going to move the needle on commodification of housing. So really solution-oriented conversations that are happening through the Institute, and a website link at the bottom and a place to sign up for their newsletters. And that think tank is really forging ahead with some very progressive conversations that other communities across Canada are really paying attention to as well. And we also expect that some people that are facing emergency situations may be picking up this report. So we have some references for them here about 211, which can plug them into services and support, and the 2 county housing offices as well, which is an important for them to know about, to get on those wait lists and to find out what might be available to them to help them in their situation. And then we're coming to the conclusion. So we again kind of summarize what we've learned, and it can be kind of overwhelming and very complex, the discussion around housing, but it is through collaboration and cooperative solution making that we expect to see some changes. And we are grateful for the SDGs for linking what we're doing locally with a global agenda. And also, you know, in many instances, we're able to learn from other communities across Canada and around the world about some of the innovative and creative solutions that might be things we could try here in our region of Canada too. And at the back of the report, there's some important thank yous to a lot of the individuals that have helped on the advisory team and our staff and board, and also some contact information for people that want to learn a little bit more from the report as well. So that's a kind of a very quick walkthrough of the report, which is available to you online. And I hope you might have some questions. I'm happy to answer those. Interested in hearing Southgate's perspective. You're celebrated as one of the leaders in our report. So this is one of the first deputations I'm doing to talk to a municipal body about what we found out, and it's great to be working together towards better times in Grey Bruce related to housing.
You're muted, Deputy Mayor Mill.
Oh, and it was such a beautiful segue into, anyway, thank you, Stuart. That is an excellent report that you and your group have put together there. A lot of data, a lot of interesting reading. Does council have any questions for Stuart? Martin.
Yeah. Excuse me. Good afternoon, Stuart. I enjoyed reading the report. On page 22, you mentioned 60,000 annual income, or $32.96 per hour, and that was put out by United Way. Mm-hmm. Do you have any idea what the average wage is? Is it around 18 or 19? Because that's part of the housing problem. There's not enough money in people's pockets. Did you get any information on that?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I don't have any statistics in front of me. That I can refer you to the data source document. United Way has published more information on the average wage, and they also put out the annual living wage for Grey Bruce, which is part of their calculations. But I think you're absolutely right, and we're hearing more and more discussion about need for a basic income or higher wages for people to help them meet the challenges of living and the cost of housing in meeting their living standards. So I think you're absolutely right. Sorry, I don't have the number for you.
Oh no, that's fine. You gave me the link. That's great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Martin. Any other questions? Barb?
Jason here.
Oh, I'll go to Barb first, and then I'll come to you, Jason.
That's fine. Yep.
Thank you. through you. Hello, Stuart. Nice to
Hi,
see you
Barb.
again. I'm kind of going to feed off of Councillor Shipston's comment about the living wage and that $1,500 a month. I know for a fact that some houses in Dundalk are renting for between $2,500 and $3,000 a month, not including utilities. And with the lack of quality employment, which we're working on, I mean, we are working toward that goal, but where you're not making $36 an hour to even afford a $1,500 a month rental rate, and then to see list prices of townhouses going for over $1 million, it's more forcing people to continue to commute to the larger cities for higher wages, thereby spending more time away from their community and their families. And it's a never-ending cycle. I don't know what the magic answer is, short of the developers, short of the people who are buying these homes to stop buying these homes. And then we're in a fix because we're not building housing supply. I don't know, is there anyone exploring how to get through that for us?
The town of Collingwood had a summit last year, and I believe it's being repeated again this October, which was a global summit where we had a lot of input from other countries and other situations, and it was really inspiring to me. And this is my own perspective, but we heard from some of the European cities where the concepts of ownership are very different. People in North America have an ideal about a detached home on an acre of land and lots of space, and we don't really intergenerational living is not something that's as common here as in our report cites that. It's not as common as some other parts of the world or across Canada. So there are solutions, but it's a whole shifting of the barometer. And I think you're right, Barb, in terms of what people are demanding from the market may not be the greatest solution for what's going to work in terms of sustainable communities. So, smaller homes, tiny homes, homes that can accommodate intergenerational living are things that are certainly rising to the fore as options that are going to be required for us in the future.
Follow up?
Go ahead. Yep, please.
So to that, when we are encouraging developers to bring a wider range of housing supply, like a variety, not the single detached homes on a 1 acre lot, we're increasing our density, we're making smaller units or asking for rental. But if the market sustains the price, And again, the tiny homes concept, you touch on the point about transportation. If you can't afford a vehicle and you're parked out in the middle of Southgate or any other rural community, how do you get anywhere? How do you get to your employment without transportation? I struggle with it, and I'm so happy that we have forged ahead with an affordable and attainable housing committee. I hope that we can, keep moving forward and find some solutions. That your report is fantastic, and I really did appreciate the presentation the other week. So, looking forward to working on some solutions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barb. Jason, you had a question?
Oh yeah, just a question and a comment. Yeah, good report, Stuart. I'm kind of on the other side of this whole thing. I have been for a long time. It's been an issue for a while. I would say it's worse now. Just in the report, it talks about being fair. Well, we live in a capitalist society, so I mean, why can some people afford that home and why can others not? I guess to me, it's kind of a simple question. I mean, as far as disabled people and stuff like that, I'll give them whatever they need. And if we're going after developers to to build these affordable housing or attainable, which I really don't even know what that means. For all the affordable or attainable housing, the developer, we're going to make them make maybe 10%. It's not going to add up to much. Anyhow, I'm rambling here a bit, but like in the report, I see there where it says based on a 35-hour work week, and then people will say this isn't right. Well, there's lots of those people that are just getting by. They have a nice looking house, a nice car, and they're working 80 hours a week to afford that. So when I see a report that says, well, if you're only going to work 30 hours a week, you can't afford a house. And I know this is trying to make it simple, but it's like, well, maybe you should work a bit more. And I understand everybody's situation is different, but I just don't see why we should be, funding these houses. If you can get a private developer to do it, that's one thing. But people are stretched so thin nowadays that, you talked about a basic income even. There's a lot of people that work their butts off that can't afford more taxes for someone to pay for someone else's house. And I guess this is an opinion. It's different opinion than most is. I just can't figure out sometimes why one person can afford something and why the other one can't. Because usually the guy that can afford it puts his nose to the grind and they do it, and they raise their family that way, and they end up doing it somehow. I mean, I know when just a quick story, I know my grandfather bought a farm in 1949 for $9,000. That was huge then. And my dad bought some farms in the 80s for 160. So I know it's really gone crazy the last couple of years, but it's always been there. And I really don't know how we're going to change it. We're going to have these committees and this and that. And I'm done rambling. I just don't know how you're going to change it. And I guess that's more of a comment than a question.
Well, I knew there was probably a question in there somewhere, but Stuart, do you want to comment or just leave that one where it is?
Oh, well, I think the councillor has really good points, and those are questions that have to be grappled with. And yeah, we're not saying there's no simple answers here. I think that's what our report really puts out, is we're looking at really complex situations, and to really try and move things forward, leaving no one behind. Yeah, it does open up these questions of equity and fairness. And yeah, I hear what our friend is saying, definitely.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Jerry, I'm sorry, this is a council meeting. Unless the rest of the council wishes to waive procedure here. Barb?
Through you to our clerk, perhaps, since this is a committee of the whole and we are talking about affordable and attainable housing, and we have two representatives from our committee, would it not be prudent to open the floor? I don't want to, that it would be council's decision, obviously, but it is committee of the whole where we are less structured, correct?
Go ahead, Lindsay.
Yeah, through the chair to you, Councillor Brain. I would agree, since Vice Chair McNulty's here and also Chair Shipston. I would want a formal motion just so everyone's on the same page if we want to do a motion to waive that procedure to allow Jerry to speak.
I'll make the motion, Lindsay. Michael here.
Thanks, Mike. Barb, you want to second that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on that motion? Not hearing any opposition to that motion. Excellent. Jerry, you're up, please.
Okay, thank you. And I'll keep this short. We knew early on as we started the committee that this was complex, and it doesn't get any less complex as time goes on. It's a serious, huge issue. But I'm wondering, and more from maybe a lack of understanding point of view, when we do collectively infrastructure, so whether we're the taxpayers or we're the administrative staff or we're the councillors who make the decisions, are we not subsidizing the investor who comes in, uses that infrastructure, doesn't live in the community, might charge over $2,500 a month rent plus utilities, and sells that property at a profit, that have we not subsidized that private enterprise? So we can't, like, that seems to me to be, I've wrestled with this for the last several weeks. To me, that's a form of subsidization, but when we start to talk about trying to help folks out that find themselves in vulnerable situations, partly because of the growth on the other side, we run into this resistant notion of not being able to pay to support. So that's only my comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. And you're absolutely right. It is a very complex issue, as we can see from the report here. I'm going to maybe direct that to Dave. Do you want to comment on that, Dave, or?
Just so that, you know, we kind of have an understanding of how a developer comes into town. Basically, the developer, when they come into town and secure a piece of property, they're put through the planning process to zone the property and do all the studies required to make sure the property, good areas and bad areas, whether wetland or developable, are used in how they're used in a certain fashion, whether it's preserved stormwater or for actual housing development. And they put up securities to pay for all those peer reviews of the studies they perform so our engineers peer review them. Once their project gets approved and they have to then go to the development phase, they get into agreements with the municipality, whether it's a servicing agreement to service the land, maybe pre-development agreement for site alteration, or a subdivision agreement. They have to pay for all of those developments, bringing the soils in, installing the services, the roads, the gutters, the water main, the hydrants, you name it, they pay for all that. And then when we're done with that, when they go to build a house, they get building permits like anyone else, and they pay development charges. And those development charges are kind of the right to membership, let's call it. It's a different word for municipalities, but it's really to buy into the fire truck and the wastewater plant and the wells and all those services we have in the community. They're buying in to have access to those. So there's a lot of ways we charge or make them pay for putting infrastructure in the ground and having access to those services, in that development is paid by development. That's the core theme of all these types of things, is that we don't put any of these costs burdened onto the taxpayers. There are some with the way some things are structured, but by and large, a large percentage, if not all of it, is paid by the developer.
And look at that, the planner wants to comment. Go ahead, Clinton.
Dave left off one little thing at the end there, and that's after it's been sold and developed, there's an increase in assessment that happens. And on land that was previously assessed really low for tax purposes, that has then been increased, which then goes back into general coffers for taxpayers, or to meet the needs of the community. So that's the sort of the last piece to close the loop then, so that it really is a continuing benefit for the township over the long haul for development and to increase assessment. And it happens in different forms, whether it's small scale or large scale. It does, any increase in assessment is generally a good thing for the ratepayers as a whole, not necessarily for an individual, depending on their circumstances.
Right. Thanks, Clinton. So try to head this off so it doesn't turn into a planning meeting. I'm gonna bring us back to Stuart's report. If anyone has any final questions or thoughts. Sorry, Jerry, not to cut you off there, but I mean, good question. And a lot of people don't understand how that whole development thing works, but I don't want to get too straight over onto that, because I think we're going to have some more discussion about that very thing as we go along in our meeting here. So Any further questions for Stuart related to his presentation? Okay, not hearing any. So thank you very much, Stuart. It was an excellent report, excellent discussion. Always appreciate your thoughts, and I wish you well for the rest of the day.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, everyone. A great pleasure. Have a great day.
Yep, thank you. So I have a motion here to receive Stuart's report. It's in front of everyone there. Does someone care to move that recommendation to receive? Barb, seconded by?
I'll second it. Martin.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Martin. Any discussion? Any opposition to that motion? That is carried. Thank you very much. So moving on to reports of municipal officers, we come to the Chief Administrative Officer, Dave Milner. He's going to give us a report on the Affordable Attainable Housing Committee progress. So look forward to this, Dave. Go ahead.
Good. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Milne. What I'm going to do today is go through the slides that we created with the Affordable Attainable Housing Advisory Committee. And Jerry McNulty's here today with me as Vice Chair to help with the presentation, and we'll interject from time to time. But we'll go through this as quickly as possible. I think it was important to preface this presentation with the vital statistics that Stuart did a great job of presenting. So next slide is basically the committee and the responsibility areas. So Councillor Shipston is the chair and looks after developer relations. Jerry McNulty is the vice chair. Future affordability and sustainability, sustaining affordable attainable housing. Jennifer DeYoung is public education. Morgan McCannell, social, financial, and health issues. Jan Powell is a member for underfunding. Muriel Scott, ensuring future affordability. Councillor Michael Shearson, councillor liaison. And Deputy Mayor Mayor John Woodbury is the ex officio member. Many of these people were unable to attend today, summer traveling and other commitments. I know there's a seniors meeting today that a lot of these people volunteer on other things, so they send their regrets that they couldn't attend. Next slide, please. So as council know, council created the terms of reference, which was adopted with the committee, and they take on and work under that terms of reference that defines the committee's purpose. We have added principles that we'll bring back likely to a next couple of meetings that the committee has added and thinks gives the terms of reference a bit more substance. The terms of reference provides responsibilities, membership, chair, vice chair appointments, quorum, and how they function there, reporting and resources, meeting schedules, and terms of the committee, and remuneration, as well as a glossary of terms. Next slide, please. This is a little bit inaccurate because we held our 8th meeting last night. The first committee meeting was held September 28th of there's a typo, 2021. And the meetings are the 4th Tuesday of each month at 7 p.m. with the exception of December. So anyone's welcome to attend. What what's the committee been doing? We went through a committee orientation, reviewed and approved the Affordable Attainable Housing Advisory Committee terms of reference document. And since that, gathering information and creating action items. Next slide. So the information gathering, we received reports from staff on development charges and building fees, affordable housing options being rental, starter homes, tiny homes, land lease, housing parks, secondary suites, seniors accessible, low maintenance, and accommodations. We also had information on the new official plan and the housing policies. Southgate owned surplus land, so property that we have under our care. We've looked at some of those properties for possible future projects, and we had information from the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. Next slide, please. So some more information gathering. We had actually delegations from Anne Marie Shaw, Grey County Housing Director. White Rose and Flatto both presented. Ron Davidson, when we were in the middle of our new official plan review, reported to the committee, and as well as Clint Stredwick talked about general planning and the official plan as well at some meetings. Next slide. So some of the actions taken, members were each assigned areas of interest and specialization to report back during committee meetings, and we've seen those that were assigned to each member earlier. The committee looked at 26 affordable housing goals and tasks and established those. And then they ranked those goals into the 7 priority tasks that have been established, and we'll talk about those 7. And they developed 2 committee resolutions for Southgate Council to consider that we'll report on later in this presentation. So the first 3 are apply a housing first policy to work with developers of privately owned property. The second task was to apply the housing first policy to municipally owned surplus land. And the third is to conduct a community survey and data collection. And we'll go into each of these in a bit more detail. Next slide. The 4th, 5th, and 7th, 6th, and 7th are investigate the merits of forming an Attainable Housing Development Corporation. And our next presentation that we'll get into, we'll talk about that. Considering reducing or waiving development charges in relation to specific affordable attainable housing projects. Explore the existing planning policy frameworks and zoning bylaw. And 7, update the official plan and zoning bylaw to accommodate additional residential housing models and types. Next slide. So the first was that housing first policy in relation to privately owned property. But first we want to put forward a definition that's in the terms of reference. And that definition is about housing, what housing first means. Housing first is an evidence-based best practice or program in which homeless individuals are assisted first to meet their housing needs before they are required to meet other treatment expectations or other supports are implemented. Housing first also refers to a specific program which is unique approaches and resources, whereas housing first is a philosophy based on meeting a person's most basic needs for housing unconditionally that is not tied to one specific program. Next slide. So specifically related to applying this housing first policy to privately owned property, recommendations to council to implement the policy related to future residential development and approvals that would allocate a percentage of affordable attainable housing builds be incorporated into each project. So that's one of the strategies around this number 1 task. Second point is support local employers through their approval process and incentives to create employee housing. And we have 2 employers right now with or seeking to find land that need to, they feel, build accommodations that they would house their employees in at an affordable rent level as long as they work for that organization. There will be policies, we believe, that will need to be changed maybe to better support those types of developments. Next slide. So the second part of this housing first policy related to, or task related to privately owned is recommendation to council to implement a policy that would require future residential developments to have a percentage of affordable attainable housing builds incorporated into each of their projects. Also to support local employers through approval process and incentives to create employer-owned employee housing, and to identify major employers and members of the community that may be interested in contributing to a housing fund. Next slide. So the second part of this housing first policy is related to owned surplus tasks. So our second task was to identify urban and rural owned township lands that could be used as affordable attainable housing projects. And we created a lengthy list of what we have. And some of that was in relation to, we investigated the viability of the list related to urban and rural township owned lands. and that could be used for private or public affordable attainable housing projects. One of them we're looking at is some land on Ganelg Street, the Proton Station parkland, and the purchase, possibly in future, look at the purchase of private sector lands for this type of future development. Next slide. So the third task is something the committee's working on right now, and we have a draft of a survey, and I'll maybe get Jerry to talk about this a bit. But the committee created this community survey to receive and basically mine and get feedback data. The survey will be posted and distributed through the township's website, social media sites, and municipal office, and the library front counter, as well as through social support services and some of those partners we have. To inform and educate is what the goal of this is, the community on housing needs and options. So we want to get feedback, and we also want to educate people as to, and the next comment is YIMBY, that we change the mindset. And yes, in my backyard, these types of housing projects can be integrated in, into a project that maybe has 100 homes. Maybe 10% or 15% of those could be affordable, attainable, lower floor space type homes, but they could be integrated in through back-to-back developments and so on. And the idea here, again for this survey, is to collect those ideas and receive feedback and mine that data into something we can use as a committee to go forward and help make decisions and provide good information to council. Anything you want to add so far, Jerry, on those first three?
No, I think just as far as the community survey, the value of it is that it's hopefully a broad cross-section. It'll cover and catch all the different types of housing needs. But as Stuart presented, the lived experience is really, really important, to speak with people that are actually living in a situation and find out from them what's going to work. So we would plan to send this survey out hopefully in the next month or so. That's all, Dave.
Good. Next slide. Next slide, please. Maybe having some technical difficulties. Here we go. So the community survey, there's basically 6 key areas that is included in that survey. The information outcomes are we're looking for from this community survey as number 1 is to really educate and make some awareness of the housing challenges people face in our community. Whether you're a person that needs those housing, affordable and attainable housing options, or whether you're not, and that people realize some of the challenges that your neighbors and community members may be facing. The other 5 things are also really important, but to find out what the current housing satisfaction levels are in our community, find out the type of housing that would fit, your present needs as if you were filling out this survey. Looking for feedback on housing options Southgate should have more of, and seeking information on homelessness if we do have that problem of any kind of level, as well as surveying the community on their top 3 housing needs or priorities. What we do here in relation to point number 5 is there is some couch surfing going on in the community, but again, that would be related to some level of homelessness, obviously, if they're trying to find the proper communication or proper accommodations for themselves. Next slide, please. Number 4 is investigate the merits of forming an attainable housing development corporation. And I think I talked a bit about this earlier, that we've got another presentation we're going to expand on, but we'll give you kind of the Cole's notes here in this point. The committee has requested Southgate staff create a presentation and proposal to develop a partnership to creating a housing development corporation with the goal of, number 1, developing a South Grey municipal partnership with Grey Highlands, Hanover, Southgate, and West Grey, creating an attainable housing development corporation, sharing cost of an employee to set up and manage the Attainable Housing Corporation, and creating a management structure to include terms of reference, agreement on municipal oversight, relationships, and decision-making on the business plan, financial contributions, and board member expertise. Next slide. Number 5, consider reducing or waiving development charges. I think you've heard us talk a bit about this in the past, that as we go into our development charges study in 2022. But the committee recommends that council consider discussions and new policies in the 22 development charges review process to support long-term rental housing projects that will sustain affordable, attainable housing for a period of not less than 20 years. If DC policies are changed to reduce or waive fees, it would be approved by a development agreement and registered on property title of the property to maintain that affordable status. And the last one is to identify and recommend other financial incentives or reductions of developers' costs. And so when we talk development charges, we're also talking in this bucket, kind of those, permit fees and so on that they may have to occur, whether it's building, whether it's planning, whether it's zoning. We may have to put a bit of skin in the game to make it happen if we're really serious about it. Next point, or slide, please. So number 6 is, and number 6 and 7 are both along the lines of policy framework and zoning, but the committee recommends council reflect on Southgate's new official plan housing policies, that we explore the existing planning policy framework and zoning bylaw, that we look at Southgate's zoning bylaw and comprehensive review of that bylaw by making it a priority to support housing, and changes being made in the rural county planning policies to create a residential units and address affordable housing crisis in our communities. So there's some challenges at the county that are restricting, I think, some rural development that we may need to consider if we're going to get serious about solving this problem and creating a wide breadth of affordable housing options. Next slide. Number 7 is a bit repetitive, but it talks about updating the official plan, which has already been done, and the zoning bylaw to accommodate additional residential units. The committee recommends that council identify the changes in the official plan and the zoning bylaw to support implementing additional housing and development options. Southgate's new official plan housing policies report on housing supply, intensification, affordability, and secondary dwelling units related type policies. Next slide. And we're going to take a few minutes because I think, some of this may have got glossed over and missed a bit, but we want to reflect, the committee thought it was important to reflect on the new official plan and these housing policies directly during this meeting. So 3.4 in the new official plan housing, point number 1, the township will ensure that a variety of housing types is provided to satisfy the present and future social, health, safety, and well-being requirements of residents. Point number 2 under housing was particular attention needs to be given to housing for people with special needs, including assisting housing for low-income households, seniors housing, and housing for persons with disabilities, etc. Next slide. 3.4.1 talks about supply. The township will ensure that residential growth can be accommodated for a minimum of 15 years through residential intensification, redevelopment, and new residential development within the designated settlement area of the township. Next slide. And under supply, it's point number 2. Given the servicing limitations within the settlement areas, however, most of the residential growth for the township will occur within Dundalk. Lower density development within the unserviced settlement areas may be considered where the site conditions are suitable for communal and individual wells and septic systems, and where permitted by this official plan. Medium and high density housing shall generally only be considered in Dundalk. Next slide. Again, for supply, point number 3, the township will also ensure that at least a three-year supply of residential land is available through lands already zoned to facilitate residential intensification and redevelopment, or in draft plan approval plans of subdivisions or registered plans. Next slide. Then we go into intensification under 3.4.2. The first point is residential intensification shall be achieved by developing vacant land or underutilized lots within the existing developed area and allowing for a secondary dwelling unit, i.e. apartment, within new dwellings, converting or expanding existing residential buildings to create new residential dwellings, converting or expanding existing industrial, commercial, or institutional buildings for residential use, and redeveloping brownfield sites. Next slide. Under intensification number 2, it is recognized that intensification may require relief from one or more provisions of the township zoning bylaw. Such relief shall be granted where council is satisfied that proper land use planning is occurring. Next slide. Under affordability 3.4.3, point number 1, affordable housing is defined as the follows. In the case of home ownership, is the least expensive of the following: housing where the purchase price is at least 10% below the average purchase price of a resale unit in Grey County, or the annual housing expenses do not exceed 30% of the gross household income for low or moderate incomes before tax household income. Next slide. Now this one is the same, only it's point B, affordable housing is defined as point B, the case where rental housing is the least expensive of the following at or below the average market rent in Grey County, or rent prices do not exceed 30% of the gross household income for low and moderate incomes. Next slide. Under affordability point 2, the township strongly encourages affordable ownership and rental housing, and in this regard has set a target of 30% of all dwellings to fall within this price space. Point 3, the bulk of affordable rental units will likely be provided in the form of secondary suites, as explained below. And number 4, semi-detached dwellings, townhomes, low-rise apartment buildings, and secondary suites generally provide the best opportunity for affordable housing. Next slide. Affordability point number 5. In order to encourage affordable housing, the township may consider a request for a grant in lieu of residential development charges, planning fees, and building permits in return for a commitment by the developer to meet specified affordability targets. The township will, point number 6, the township will actively support the county's efforts to establish an affordable housing committee and their efforts to increase the amount of affordable housing within the township and throughout Grey County. Next slide. Point number 7, under affordability. The official plan also encourages the creation of new dwellings that do not fall within the affordable housing category to still be financially attainable for low and medium income households wherever possible. Point number 8, the township may also give consideration to a variety of zoning standards and subdivision design standards where the appropriate, including smaller lot areas and frontages, reduce yard requirements, and increase lot coverage in order to facilitate affordable and attainable housing. In some instances, it may also be appropriate to reduce the on-site parking requirements of the zoning bylaw as a means of facilitating more affordable, attainable housing. Next slide. Affordability number 9, during the next update of the township zoning bylaw and also at other appropriate times, the township will give consideration to pre-zoning specific properties or general areas of Dundalk to allow for increased densities and facilitate affordable or attainable housing, including rental units. Number 10, the township zoning bylaw should include a minimum floor area requirement that allows for small affordable dwellings in all zones where residential dwellings are permitted. The zoning bylaw could simply defer to the Ontario Building Code for minimum floor area requirements. and I've highlighted that. Did you want to expand on that, Clint, a little bit?
The main reason why you would do something like that is the building code has a set of minimum requirements with respect to housing size, and it's done for safety reasons. And rather than have one set out in the building code, so you actually have two different standards, you have a minimum size based on the building code and then another one on the zoning. You just get rid of the one in the zoning and say, use the one in the building code. And that tends to get rid of some of that issue. This is where ours is actually quite large. So this would allow people to make smaller homes and therefore cheaper, using less materials, less wood, and that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you, Clint. Next slide. So this new section on secondary dwelling units, point number 1, secondary dwelling unit is defined as either a secondary unit within a principal dwelling, i.e. apartment, or a dwelling unit situated within a separate building that is ancillary to a principal dwelling on the site. Point number 2, secondary dwelling units provide an excellent opportunity for affordable rental housing and or for the provisions of housing for a family member in need of some level of supervision. Next slide. Point 3, under secondary dwelling, within the designated areas, urban areas, a secondary dwelling unit will be permitted within a detached dwelling. A secondary dwelling within a semi-detached dwelling or townhouse may be considered where the landowner can appropriately address matters related to parking, congestion, snow storage space, and visual impact on the streetscape. Point number 4, a secondary dwelling within an ancillary building will also be permitted on larger lots outside of the settlement area, subject to restrictions on unit size, location on the property, and sharing of driveway, etc. Next slide. And last point on secondary dwellings is the provisions of the secondary dwelling units will be provided in the comprehensive zoning bylaw. In 3.4.5, we don't deal with it a lot, but I think we need to keep it on our radar as far as short-term accommodations. The township recognizes that there are short-term accommodations and needs for that because we do have limited overnight accommodations or emergency accommodations in the area. Next slide. So we get into what the progress of the committee has been, and this one is one of their 2 resolutions that they've passed, and we're advancing them to council for council to consider through the future decisions and planning process. But the committee recommends that Southgate Council consider resolution number 1 from November 23rd of 2021, moved by Jerry McNulty, seconded by Councillor Michael Shearson. Be it resolved that committee recommend that council consider a method that would encourage a certain percentage of new development approved contain affordable and attainable housing, and that was carried. So I think that's pretty straightforward. I mean, maybe Jerry would like to comment on this resolution.
I think we didn't get caught up in what that percentage was because we talked about the larger developers. It would be different for them than it would be for the small developer who's maybe doing 4 or 5 units compared to a larger developer. So, but I think the idea here is that there be some thought given to encouraging any development to consider affordable units and then to determine what's fair in each individual circumstance. I think that was the idea of this resolution.
Next slide. This was resolution number 2, and it was adopted by the committee on April 26th of 2022 and moved by Councillor Michael Shearson, seconded by Morgan McCannell. Be it resolved that the committee appoint Jerry McNulty and Muriel Scott to work with the CEO and the mayor to create a presentation proposal to neighboring municipalities for a South Grey affordable housing strategy and staff lead. And that was carried. Anything you want to say there, Jerry?
I think only that we, I think, went through various discussions, and it seemed to kind of come back to there has to be some control over these units. We would get talking about how do we get these units put together, and then, well, how do we make sure that they remain affordable? And there has to be, it seems, a group or an entity that will make sure that they remain in good repair, of course, but also that they remain affordable, attainable in the future. So this idea of not limiting it to Southgate alone, but to go to other municipalities to see if they would be interested in exploring some kind of a development corporation that could look after setting up a development corporation, a staff position to handle all there's a lot of information that comes through on housing. There's a lot of stuff. So it would be a way to, in an organized way, deal with the information and try to put it into action.
Okay, next slide. So considerations to increase housing. Grey County Housing is doing a lot of work on it. They are restricted by the money they have available in their scope, but they do a lot of good work. Another consideration is promote the increase of rental housing stock in the community. Residential developers requirement to incorporate a percentage of affordable attainable housing in each future approved subdivision agreement development project. Next point is existing property conversions or builds to increase affordable attainable housing options. Private sector affordable builds in partnership with the use of municipal lands, and we do have contractors that are willing to do that. We just need to find those lands. And employer builds, the economic development officer is working with someone to find land to do an employer build. And they would, we talked a bit about this before, but this would be to support their employees with rental housing and a workplace in combination. Next slide. So some housing projects are going on. I think we've all heard about the Rose Lane and the deconstruction and reconstruction of that property. That's going to definitely add new development there. We have two employers, like I talked a bit about earlier, that's wanting to do worker affordable rental accommodations. The Lions Medical Center conversion, we're working with the Lions and Southeast Grey Support Services to look at a project in 2024 when that building is vacated and convert it to 7 units of affordable housing in discussion, and that's in discussion phase. And we have some members of the committee attending a meeting with Southeast Grey to try and support that and facilitate that. And the last item, we've talked to council about this, is this 10 units or 1 floor on the new medical center with Southeast Grey Community Health Center to create a 10-unit affordable housing development. And that's part of the reason that we're also working on this development corporation, that would get converted to that someday. But anyway, still working away at that one. Next slide. So future housing recommended projects to increase community options. So private sector affordable rental projects, employer developer projects for workers, housing park development projects to site modular, tiny and trailer residential units that would provide homeowners with the land leases and services to try and get started at a lower price point. And because once you get them in, then there's an opportunity to build equity and graduate to something that they are more in line with their goals in housing. But everybody has to get a chance to start somewhere. Next slide. that's the end of it. I mean, it was kind of a whirlwind tour because I know we're tight on time just to keep things rolling. But this was, I was really proud, and I've been really proud of working with this committee. And you know, when we put this together and seen all the things that the committee's done, I think they're pretty proud of the results. But I'll defer to Jerry to maybe put a bow around this presentation.
Well, I think first of all, we have to be thankful and appreciative of the council who supported this idea in the very first place. I think we have to always keep in mind where this idea sort of started out of a discussion at the food bank at one Christmas distribution, and it was regarding the link between food insecurity and housing insecurity. And so I think the fact that these months have gone by and there's lots of discussion has taken place, and some things that have happened that we had no idea when we started. The Rose Lane development, we had visits from Anne Richat early on, and they wanted to do a build, but there was no money at the time, and then all of a sudden there's some money released, and there we go. We're going to have another a bunch of units there. So again, and I do want to also acknowledge the involvement of David and staff, Lindsay and Holly, and all the work that they've done to sort of keep things organized and on track, and also the involvement of Clinton and also Bev has sat in on a bunch of our meetings, and Terry Murphy. There's been some crossover, I think, that can happen between this group and what Terry is doing. So again, just appreciation to the council for supporting this idea in the first place. My hope, my personal hope, is this becomes a standing, I'm not sure that's the right term, but it becomes a standing committee or an ongoing committee that can sort of help with this whole issue of housing. So are there any questions that anyone has after this presentation? Thanks, Dave.
You're muted.
Oh, good thing it was muted, that last comment I made. Thank you, Jerry, for your comments, and thank you, Dave, for the presentation. There's a lot there to digest. Just before we go to questions, I'll maybe put the resolution on the table. Does anyone require me to read it? It's fairly lengthy there. I think we've all read it. It's in the agenda package. So if someone would be kind enough to move that resolution. Martin, thank you. And second? Is someone going to second that motion?
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
I don't see the resolution. For some reason,
I will read the resolution. Be it
well,
resolved.
or show it on the screen.
Be it resolved that the Committee of the Whole received the Affordable Attainable Housing Committee Progress Report presentation, which we just saw for information, and that the Committee of the Whole recommend that Council direct staff to receive the Affordable Attainable Housing Committee Resolution number 1, dated November 23rd, 2021, as information, and that the Committee of the Whole recommend that Council direct staff to create policies and a bylaw for Council consideration related to the minimum percentage of affordable and attainable rental and/or saleable units to be constructed in future residential projects and to be reflected in the subdivision or development agreements, and that the Committee of the Whole recommend that Council direct staff to develop the conditions for inclusion in all future subdivision agreements to require all urban residential developments going forward that they shall have a percentage of their construction builds to include a combination of affordable and attainable rental housing in apartment builds and saleable units in residential developments. So in essence, what it's asking for is staff to bring back to council, how do we do this? How could we do this? And put it in front of council. So that motion has been moved by Martin. Do we have a seconder? Barb, thank you.
Also second.
Thank you. So now, do we have any questions or discussion for Jerry or Dave on the presentation? Barb?
There's a lot to unpack there, and I want to thank the committee and staff for all that they've accomplished in such a short time. We still have a lot of work to do, and I agree with Jerry that this is not something that is going to be resolved this year or perhaps even next year. It's going to be an ongoing effort. I'll look forward to how we're going to be able to accomplish all of this. But my question, I guess I'll narrow it down to one area, and it's the secondary units. And we have commercial buildings that may or may not be housing people without proper approvals and codes and life safety initiatives. In fact, there is and it is just a rumor about Hanover's fire recently. But what I'm wondering is how do we make developing those secondary units, those granny suites, those secondary dwellings in ancillary buildings easier to obtain and more affordable for the property owner to enter into those arrangements? I know it's just one small piece of the puzzle, and they're not necessarily within the settlement areas, but if we make it so unattainable for the property owner or unaffordable for them to invest in, they resort to perhaps doing it anyway without proper oversight. So I'm just wondering, maybe this is a Clinton planning building question. How do we make it an attractive option for homeowners to provide those secondary apartments, those multi-residential, intergenerational is the term I think Jerry or Stuart may have used, intergenerational dwellings, more attainable.
I'm going to take
Who wants to? Yeah, you have a run at that, Dave. Sure.
I'm going to take a run of it first before the departments start putting zoning and their spins on it. But I think we all need to take our department hats off and put it all on the table and figure it out. Like, we're not going to, if you are wanting to come forward and take out a building permit to do a granny suite or something to create housing to get another house in Southgate, we're not going to charge a building. I'm just throwing this out for discussion. We're not going to charge a building permit fee. We're going to do the inspections. We're going to get it facilitated. We're going to, do the zoning, and we're going to, maybe if there's development charges, forgive them. But I mean, we're still going to get our taxes at the end of the day, but at least facilitate allowing them to get started and the income to come in, but to create that affordable unit. There may need to be some policy along that you need to keep that housing rental unit under $1,200 a month. I don't know, but let's just throw our hats off and not get into silos of departments and just create something that will figure it out. But you need to maintain it affordable. So maybe there has to be an agreement that you will have to pay development charges if you take it out of that affordability realm. And the county did that with some projects in Southgate, or one project in Southgate, that development charges are still hanging over them, but they didn't charge them to get it and to put it into that rental stock. Clint, do you want a shot at it?
Do you want to take a run at that or not?
Couple things. If you're just dealing with accessory apartments that are within the home, not a lot is suitable for that. Like some of those really, really small lots may not be suitable for that because of everything from not having enough parking and snow storage, to if it's more in the rural area, not having enough ability to have water and sewer. Just depends. So every lot's a little different. So I think that's where it's important to have a standard of policy that says, okay, if you want to have one of these, here's the rules. You have to have it inspected by the fire chief. You have to have it inspected by the building department before you can have one. You have to have 2 parking spaces, one for the home and one for the accessory structure. And you have to have a spot to either store snow or have an agreement to remove it or something to that effect. Those are just off the top of my head. But that's how you're going to get to allow people to do it. If they have a checklist of things, here's what I need to do in order to get this apartment, they'll go through them. And so long as it's safe, the township is pretty on board with that idea.
Okay, thank you. Dave?
I'm going to challenge Clint with his canned comments, and I appreciate those because I do want to hear them. But I think we can create policy that says that specific development agreement for that home that doesn't have the capability of having parking spaces could have a secondary dwelling or apartment space that doesn't have access to parking. And that would be part of the development. And maybe for that type of a development, it would again be by development or some kind of an agreement that would say, hey, again, you need to maintain that square footage of space and get some relief from whatever and maintain that rental at a less than $1,000 or less than $1,200 again. But again, I think we need to be creative and have multiple levels of policy that would accommodate a secondary dwelling, possibly in any dwelling, where snow storage and parking and all those challenges are not an issue. That we're more concerned about the safety of that secondary apartment in relation to entrance and egress.
Barb, you had a question? Point?
Just to follow up to that, I mean, I'm not suggesting for a minute that we should forego life safety or fire codes or any of those things, or, you know, having a laundry list of things that, you know, if you live in the urban boundary, they need to meet this criteria. If you're out in a rural setting, you know, you have a little bit more ability to get creative. But a lot of seniors, you know, Stuart mentioned about downsizing, you know, right sizing, getting out of that 4 or 5 bedroom home into a smaller unit and maybe into a townhouse. But if the townhouse is listed at over $1 million and they want to stay in their own community, a townhouse is even out of the question. So how do we make it affordable? And maybe this is where Dave is, you know, thinking, we can meet all of the life safety criteria of a secondary suite, fire separation and all of that, but how do we provide a financial incentive to having a intergenerational living arrangement? It may not be, and then, you know, when that changes, that secondary suite is available at an affordable rent to someone outside of the home. But I was just throwing it out there as something that we can think about, maybe through a community improvement plan. Clinton's got his hand up. There may be opportunities for, if you're going to build this, there's an opportunity for some funding, and maybe make that more, or communicate that better.
Clint?
I just following up on your comment there, the community improvement plan, it doesn't necessarily have to be just for commercial and industrial. I believe there's actually new policy coming forward to allow for initiatives for affordable housing. So if we can include that in that policy, then that will be one more tool in the toolbox to try and get these units available as quickly as we can.
Thank you.
Any, Michael, did you have any questions?
No, I'm good.
Oh, you okay? Okay. I guess just a question, or not really.
Hello?
Not necessarily. Hello, Mike.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing is like Barb said, like life safety rules, we have to make sure that we're not going to change those. I mean, they all have to be there. So safety is number one.
Yep, agreed. I was just from the chair, I was going to say, you know, how many decades have governments been trying to incentivize, if I can use that word, developers to do this affordable, attainable housing issue? It's gone on forever, almost, it seems like, and it's not working. Maybe the solution is that we create a corporation, no different than the Owen Sound Municipal nonprofit. And I look forward to the next report, because I expect we'll have a good discussion. That's what that sounds like on that one. But if we want to do this, maybe that's the way we do it. We stick our own oars in the water and do it, because clearly the developers are not interested in doing this. And I don't know how you get them to do it. All kinds of schemes have come up to try to, you know, percentages and money and all the rest of it. It's not working. We need to do something different, and maybe the nonprofit thing, owned and run by the township, is the way to do it, or it's a multi-municipal thing, like we're going to see in the next report. So anyway, any further questions for Dave or Jerry on that report?
I got one, Brian, if you could.
Go ahead, Jason. Yep, go ahead.
Well, I don't know if it's to Dave or Jerry. So all the work you have done, that's good. What, after all your meetings, can someone tell me what is an affordable house or apartment, or what? I guess we didn't want to talk percentage. If we can sell $900,000 houses all the time in Dundalk, what's an affordable one? What's an affordable house, and what's an affordable apartment, I guess, is what I would like to know, if you have come up with that answer or not.
Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, early in our discussions, we wrestled with the definitions of affordable, attainable, appropriate. And so our concept of affordable housing, affordable, attainable housing, is housing that meets the needs of a cross-section of the community. In one of our conversations, one of our meetings, we talked about, well, one of the developers were thinking about at that time building some smaller units and charging $350,000. Well, one of the comments from the committee, a committee member, was, well, that's, some people can't afford that. And then further conversation is that some people can't afford $150,000. Some people don't want to own. They're quite happy renting, but they need to be able to rent somewhere within their means. And I think for our terms of reference, when we started talking about what are we going to look at in terms, what will this committee look at as far as housing? Will it be purchase or rental, or particular groups? And the general consensus was that this committee will look at housing, period. For someone, for that $900,000 home, that may be affordable for someone who's just sold a $900,000 home somewhere, or a $1 million home. But for many of our folks, they're looking at something that could be around for rental rate, as we've been looking at the Wilson Corp group from Durham. They're providing accommodations, good, decent accommodations in Durham, in a modern, recently built apartment building for $600 to $900 a month. And that's the price point for some people. That's what they can afford. So I don't, I'm not sure that answers your question. Jason, but affordability is relative. It's a relative term. It depends on the circumstances of the individual that we're talking about.
Absolutely, it does. And
Well,
and
yeah,
a general rule of thumb, Jason, and Stuart talked about it in his report, was 30% of your before tax household income should be going towards your housing. Anything more than 30% of your gross income is unaffordable as a definition. I mean, everybody's going to be a little bit different, but that's a generally held definition in the industry.
yeah, no, I get it. I just, we want all this development to keep coming. Obviously, there's a lot of the percentage of the people that can afford these houses. Is all I'm saying. I just don't know. I understand it's hard to put a number on it, but there is no. Yeah, I don't know. It's very open. Like there's no. What is affordable housing? It's different to everybody, and I just don't know how everything can be fair to everybody in life. And all the best. Good luck to us, but I don't know how. We haven't been able to solve it for years, and I don't know how we're going to now. Like I said, if the private developers want to do it, great. But I don't know anybody that's in the developing business not to make money, why they would build unless we legislated $300,000 homes when they can sell $1 million homes. So just a comment. I just, yeah, it's very, very open, I would say, on what is affordable housing.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Okay, any other final questions? I think we need to move on here. Okay, not seeing any further questions. I'll call the question. Is anyone opposed to this motion? Not hearing any opposition, I'll declare that carried. 3:22, we've been at this a couple hours. Anybody interested in a 10-minute break? Yep. Well, let's say 5-minute break. Well, I got 3:22 on my clock here. Let's say we come back at 3:30. That'll give us 8 minutes. We'll cut the difference, split the difference. All right, we'll see you at 3:30.
Councillor Rice and Councillor Shearson, are you on the line still?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
Yep, I'm here. Yep.
perfect, thank you. I believe we're good to go, Deputy Mayor Milne.
I don't see the next presenter.
Oh, yes, I guess we need him.
Sorry. Yeah. Or we can cut that one a little short. There he is. Welcome back, Dave. Just before you get going here, if I could ask you to move it along a little quicker than the last one. I mean, the presentation is there. I get it. It's been in our package. Everyone's had the opportunity to see it and read it. I don't want to cut the discussion short, but I don't want you to read the presentation either. I guess that's what I'm saying here. So,
Not a problem.
All right. Have at her.
14 slides. Can we bring this?
Well,
Go
that's
ahead.
fine, but we should have the motion on the floor first, just to keep
Correct.
the clerk happy, because I know she's a happy person. I want to keep her that way. Now, here it is. Be it resolved that the Committee of the Whole received the Affordable Attainable Housing Committee South Grey Housing Development Corporation proposal presentation for information, and that the Committee of the Whole recommend that Council direct staff to receive the Affordable Attainable Housing Committee Resolution Number 2, dated April 26, 2022, as information, and that the Committee of the Whole recommend that Council direct staff to schedule presentations with the municipalities of Grey Highlands, Hanover, and West Grey to seek feedback, direction, and support for a South Grey affordable housing strategy that would consider in the 2023 budget cycle to consider hiring an employee to manage and set up a management board to create a South Grey Affordable Housing Development Corporation. Would someone care to move that, please? Martin, and seconded by Barb. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Dave.
Okay,
Please.
so I will be very quick and brief. Likely the most important thing on this slide is the small print, and it says this is a municipal initial municipal presentation. So we're looking to council to endorse this presentation and us to go forward and experience what we can maybe experience out there with other municipal partners. I'm not going to go into a lot. Those next bullets on the next slide are kind of rehash what you've already heard about 26 tasks and 7 priorities that we're focusing on. The next, go 2 slides ahead. Next one. And yes, so this just rather than go through the 7, number 4 is what we're focusing on with this presentation, which is this Attainable Housing Development Corporation concept. The next slide we'll skip by. That's again the definition of housing first, and I think it needs to be in here for the purposes of talking to other municipal partners if they're interested. Next slide is the resolution, and I'm not going to bore you with that. That we put in place. The next slide. And that's what we're looking for council to endorse when we get to the end of this. Who are we presenting to? Grey Highlands, Hanover, Southgate, and West Grey. However, at a recent CEO's meeting, I was really surprised. Other municipal lower tiers in the county think we should make this a county-wide solution. But let's start small and see if we grow that. And you'll see that in some of the budget. Next slide. So our affordable housing proposal is that the proposal is, let's stop talking about we've done a lot of housing talk. We need housing action. And so the idea is to create a South Grey affordable housing strategy. Create an Attainable Housing Development Mortgage Corporation. And this corporation would have municipal partners that would develop a long-term funding model to deliver and manage project life cycle for rental affordability and attainable ownership housing spaces in the South Grey region, or if it expands, great. And then the last point here is that we may need to consider local development policies or affordable housing development policies and project development agreements with developers. Next slide. So the business model is a vision and a mission and values, and the vision is really to create quality living spaces where people can live, work, in our communities. And the mission is to provide and maintain that affordable housing that's safe and maintained by connecting people so they can have secure spaces or raise a family in comfort and with respect. And the vision or the values of this whole project would be accessibility, accountability, collaboration, community value, visions, integrity and trust, partnerships, respect, and security. Next slide. So this is about financial support model, and really it would look at property revenues and feeding that back into the system. There'd have to be financial management and a way to make this corporation sustainable. As far as municipal support and investments, we'd have to look possibly at land contributions to the corporation, planning policies that supports the corporation, DC forgiveness, building permit, and inspection, maybe forgiveness. There have to be grants and funders. If the federal and provincial government are also going to talk about it, they got to come to the table and actually putting money behind this. That's really going to create actions instead of a bunch more white papers on this and white papers on that. Long-term mortgages, that would have to be part of the whole process, and financial management to manage that, rather than looking at something maybe 10 years. This is a 30, 40-year type management type project. Community partnerships, not-for-profits, builders, developers, and there have to be consideration for building maintenance partnerships. So then we get into the next slide is kind of that next 18 months worth of planning. If we got this together this fall would be to look at creating partnerships and organize planning some meetings, create partnerships agreement later in the fall, and establish a budget to start up the corporation looking into the 2023 budget year. In 2023, hire a corporation executive director and get a board of management in place to manage it, create the corporation strategic plan and identify partners, and identify in the last half of the year affordable housing projects that could be focused on by the local committees and work with them. And in 2024 to 2026, next slide, would be to establish the corporation and become independent of municipal funding. That might be a stretch, but try. Annual general meetings of the corporation, annual reports of members to the members of council that would be interested from the member municipalities, and grow the capacity of the corporation and affordable housing projects in each community. Then the budget we're looking at is initially for the first 4 years to contribute $40,000 a year for each municipality, 4 partners in year 1, 5 partners in year 2, and maybe 7 partners in year 3 and 4. And then look at in the first year or 2 salaries for the executive director and then add an assistant. And then there'd be travel, there'd be equipment costs, operating, audit, and legal costs to balance those revenues or those contributions to get the thing up and started, because this is not a short-term deal. This is going to take some time to get established, and it'll likely be 5 years before there's really some concrete things maybe really happening. So that's the proposal. The next slide is thank you and questions. Just wanting to get feedback on the interest. That's kind of what the committee, they've looked at this presentation and support us, presented it to council and looked to get council support and look to get other communities involved in South Grey to see what we can put together.
Thanks, Dave. Well done. Marched right through that, no troubles at all. Jerry, is there anything you'd like to add there?
No, I think only that whether we like it or not, I think we have to acknowledge that the township is in the housing business. It's kind of like we're kind of there, and something has to be done. And the idea of there's been lots of talk. There really needs to be something, some activity to get moving on this, because there's a lot of work to do in housing.
Okay, Thank you, Jerry. So Dave, am I wrong in thinking that your proposal is something similar to the Owen Sound nonprofit? Is that kind of where you're going? That's where you're going with it. So there's a model there, and I don't know how many years that housing corporation's been going up in Owen Sound, but I would hazard a guess probably 25, 30 years it's been on the go. Maybe more than that, I'm not certain, but it's certainly very successful, and it's done a very good job up there and continues to do a very good job. So it's good to sort of have that model as we move forward in this this journey. Any questions for Dave or Jerry on the presentation from council? Or Clint, did you want to add anything? Or wait for questions? Nope. Barb, go ahead. You had a question?
Actually, just Brian, you mentioned the Owen Sound Nonprofit Corporation, so we have a model to follow. You know, obviously the devil will be in the details as this comes back, and the cost to the municipalities, because this isn't, you know, it could just be Southgate bearing the cost for our own municipality. But I just, when you develop a corporation where you have multiple partners, whether that's 4 or whether that's 9 or whether that's whatever the magic number is, how do you ensure that it's an equitable distribution of housing stock across the board when you have multiple partners paying an equal amount into the pot, but you know there may be more here, more there? You know, once bitten, twice shy as far as the joint building services. That didn't, it was a good concept, but it didn't quite work out. How will this be different? And don't get me wrong, I'm not supportive of it. I'm just, you know, thinking out, you know, the obstacles so that we can get in front of them.
So, good question. I don't have the answer for you. I'm going to be really, really honest. There is, and I think the big thing is that get the municipalities together and then get them away. And the reason I say that is, what was the downfall of the joint building services was not the joint building services group. It was the bloody CAOs not getting along. And I mean, I was one of those, but there was some of us that couldn't get along with one of the members, so it just fell apart. And so I think the thing is to get it going and then get out of the way and let professionals that are in the building industry. That's why we should not be anything more than a contributor and a supporter, because we need people that has an understanding and a, you know, we're in the business of collecting taxes and spending money to keep the roads and infrastructure in place, not to be housing specialists. And I think that needs a, you know, to manage mortgages and all that sort of stuff. So I agree with Jerry. We need to get in the housing business, but we need to facilitate it, not be in it. If that's an answer for you, I'm not sure. Well, but you know, we need somebody that has got dirt under their fingernails in relation to housing, and not doing it on a part-time basis.
An independent board would help facilitate that.
Exactly.
Thank you. As I said, the devil will be in the details, and this is just the first foot forward. Thank you.
Always. Thank you, Barb. Thank you, Dave. Any other questions? Okay, not seeing any. I'll call the question. Is anyone opposed to this motion? Not seeing any opposition. That is carried. Thank you very much. Moving right along, density is not a dirty word. This is a report that came to the county council a couple weeks ago, I believe it was now. It was commissioned from the University of Guelph by the county, and it's a very interesting report. I've read through it. It's very interesting. So Clint, did I understand Dave Clint's going to take us through this one a little bit, or who?
Yeah, I'm just gonna kick it off a little wee bit here, and then we'll give Clint a minute or two. Sorry, maybe 3.
Wait, the clerk has her hand in the air. Madam Clerk, you want the motion read, don't you? Yes, she does. Be it resolved that the Committee of the Whole receive the Density is Not a Dirty Word, an educational guide for information, and that the Committee of the Whole recommend that Council receive the Density is Not a Dirty Word, an educational guide for information. Does someone want to move that for me, please? Martin, seconded by? Barb, thank you. Go ahead, Dave.
So just really, really quick, I wanted to point out that the recommendations, I think it's on page 19 of the report, we're going to pull those back into the committee discussions next meeting or two and take a look at where we think we're already focusing and where we're not focusing. We're going to pull those into a discussion and maybe prioritize and start hitting them off to see what progress we can maybe make there or send something back to council to focus on. But I think what we need to really think about density is making sure that we create denser development, apartments, 3-story walk-ups, like I'm talking multi-story apartment buildings, close to places where people can work, where people can shop and do, like there's a development down around the old Toronto Stockyards right now. And Clint mentioned it last night, an example of that places people can shop on the 1st and 2nd floor, and the rest of the building from the 3rd floor up is living quarters, or they can walk across from a housing development into a commercial development where they can do their shopping or get their needs, and rely on transit service to get them to a job maybe in Shelburne or in Dundalk or in Orangeville or in Markdale. But I think that's the kind of density development we need to think about to make sure that they're in that cluster of where services are, and that there's not a distance to work or to recreation or to transit or to other services they need. Keep it clustered in a development area. So I think we need to think about that as we plan our future. And I'll throw it to Clint after that.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, as you introduced it really is an educational guide, and it's a guide for everyone, really, planners, but also it's equally important the decision makers, being the council members and whatnot, and the community, basically, and even developers would certainly benefit from looking at this and seeing how we are approaching density in our area. As you said, it's a very good read. They go through a number of the key issues and provides like a case study. But there's a couple things I wanted to note. They have current issues and solutions here on page 13 and 14. The NIMBYism discussion there, I found really, and it gives some, I guess, direction and maybe some suggestions on how, when someone raises that in a public meeting or in a council meeting, how council and or staff can respond to those objections. And I find that's obviously very helpful, because it does it in a respectful way and eases the conversation, if you will. The other thing I wanted to point out was on page 17, which is there's myths and facts about density is not a dirty word. Also, I'm not going to read it all here for you, but there's 8 different myths and facts about density. Everything from a myth that density reduces property values in surrounding areas. It's argued that density can actually be the most highest property value. In Toronto, the highest property value is the property with the most density. So I'm not, and by that I'm not suggesting we're putting up skyscrapers, but it's the point is taken that it's not just, oh, you're putting up 4-story apartment, therefore my house is going to go down in value. No, that's not the case. So I would recommend reading that section, page 17 and 18. And then as Dave pointed on 19, you have 9 recommendations that the report brings forward. And certainly they're all very good, and we can look at actually including some of those in our policy going forward at the township and through our updating of everything from official plans to zoning bylaws. The zoning bylaw is certainly going to be the next one that gets updated. And again, I found them all very useful. I particularly like the one about offers guidance to municipal politicians and meeting chairs on how to respond to common NIMBY complaints and to dismiss any discriminatory language from participants that can dismantle density initiatives in Grey County. That struck home because sometimes you get that. Someone derails something right off the bat. So beyond that, it's also got an extensive appendix on types of density. It doesn't all have to be the 100-story skyscraper. There's a whole range in between. And then some additional appendices on definitions. We were speaking about that earlier, about definitions of affordable housing and that sort of thing. And it provides a lot of those things in the background. And the final one that Jerry actually mentioned last night was in Appendix B. It talks about the interview questions that they asked some of the developers and respondents while they were developing this. And this is going to actually be, some of these questions are very similar to what the Affordable Housing Committee is using for their survey of our specific community. So that to me sounds like we're on the right track if that is in fact the case. So all in all, a good read, and if you haven't read it yet, you should.
Thank you, Clinton. Just more reading, but it's good reading. Any questions for Dave or Clint regarding the report from council members? Barb?
I only have one question, and it was Dave's reference to 3-story walk-ups. And I'm not sure if you were referring to walk about, like you can walk from the commercial to the residential, but what are the current, and this maybe lends to the building code and AODA standards, you know, a 3-story walk-up to me implies there's no elevator, it's difficult to move in and out of, and it restricts the abilities of those who could physically stay there. It limits who would be able to live in such a complex. Did you mean a walk up, or would there be multi-level density dwellings without an elevator?
Well, let's find out, Dave.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's maybe I used that comment, but I mean, there isn't many homes that don't have stairs in our own homes. So I'm not sure whether, maybe you can't have a 3-story walk up, but a 3-story type building, whether it's elevator related or not, I think that's that denser type building is what we're going to have in the future, because it's the print of the land and the number of floors you go up that makes these developments cheaper to build.
Sure.
So
okay,
I mean, maybe Bev or Clint can comment on whether you can even build a 3-story walk up, or I mean, I know I've talked to Shakir about this. We've never got into the great details of access, but why not a 2-story walk up or a 3-story walk up? You have stairways in your houses. How can you comment, Bev?
Just point of privilege before we go to Bev. Just remember that some people are looking to get out of those stair-infested dwellings because they're not able to function within them. So, you know, we're assuming we're able-bodied, and we're looking at a variety of housing that is suited to a variety of people.
Yep, fair point. Fair
Fair.
point. Yep, Bev? Go ahead.
Okay, so the Ontario Building Code requires that any public building after going off of the grade level requires some elevator device. Depending on the size of the building, regulates the size of the elevator or the amount of elevators to be put in. As you know, our Erskine Center has an elevator that probably 2 people, if you call it an elevator, but it does meet the scope of the elevator, 2 people could stand in, where the Flato Block 75 4-story building has 2 elevators that probably 6 to 8 people could stand in. So the Ontario Building Code does regulate that. Single private homes, on the other hand, do not. So if you're having an accessory apartment in a private home and it's being rented out as a private home, then you do not require the elevator. But again, that's only, I think you're allowed that up to 3 stories maximum, which would be three single family dwellings in one building. Not 60 apartments in a 3-story building. I'd have to check for sure.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Bev. Any other questions from council for any of these good gentlemen? Okay, not seeing any. I'll call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Not seeing any opposition. I'll declare that carried. Thank you very much. Well, boy, we've had a lot of information there today, a lot of reading, if you haven't already read it. So the next motion is to resolve back to council. Be it resolved that the committee resolve back to the special council meeting at 3:56. Would someone care to move that, please? I'm going to say, Michael, are you there?
I can move it or second it, Brian's Jason.
All right, Jason moves it.
Yeah.
Barb will second it. Oh.
Michael's here, yeah?
All right, Michael, move it, and Jason will second it. Thank you. Anyone opposed to that? That is carried. Thank you very much. So now we are back into special council meeting. So we have the motions resulting from the committee of the whole. The first one is regarding the vital focus on housing report presentation. And the motion is that we receive the Community Foundation Grey Bruce Housing Vital Statistics Report for information. Would someone care to move that, please? Barb, thank you. Seconder? Martin, thank you. Anyone opposed to that motion? That is carried. Thank you. The next is Affordable or Attainable Housing Committee Progress Report. Do we need to read that motion? It's exactly the same as what's being recommended. Okay. So would someone care to move that motion, please? Martin, thank you. Seconder? Jason, are you there?
Yep, that's fine. Go ahead. Yep.
Thank you. Anyone opposed to that motion? No opposition. That's carried. Thank you very much. The next is the Affordable Attainable Housing Committee's report and recommendation regarding South Grey Housing Development Corporation proposal. Would someone care to move that for me, please? Mike, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
All right, I'll have you move that. Barb will second it. Thank you very much. Anyone opposed to that motion? No opposition. That is carried. The third, the next motion is the density to receive it. The density is not a dirty word. Would someone care to move that, please?
I'll move it again.
Thank you, Mike. Seconded by Martin. Thank you very much. Anyone opposed to that motion? No opposition. That is carried. Thank you very much. Now we move on to reports from municipal officers. And I welcome our HR coordinator, Kayla Best. She has a report for us regarding disconnect from work policy. Oh, Lindsay, yes? What did I screw up now?
No, you didn't, Deputy Mayor Milne. Can we just do a motion to go past 4:30?
Sure. We're not gonna though.
Well, I might
Okay.
disagree with you. I don't know.
Yeah, okay. Barb's gonna move that we go past 4:30. Would someone second that, please? Martin, thank you very much. Any opposition? Anyone opposed to that? No opposition, that is carried. Thank you very much. Sorry, Kayla, to interrupt there, but that was procedurally, we needed to do that. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Kayla, you're up, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is a report. We wanted to bring a draft forward just for feedback before bringing this by bylaw. It is something that's legislated through the Employment Standards Act. So I would just take questions.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions to Kayla regarding the report? Not seeing any. Barb, go ahead.
Of course I have one. Just to clarify, we're required or legislated to have a policy, and we encourage employees to find ways to disconnect from work, but it doesn't preclude them from working outside of the normal work hours should they feel the need. The best practice, it's up to the employee to follow it.
Yes, if I may.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, that's right. So this essentially doesn't change anything. It just formalizes what we're already trying to do. We would like people to disconnect from work, and now we have a formal policy as to, you know, the times that maybe you can't because operationally it doesn't make sense, and times that you really should try.
Right.
Correct. And I think it also is timely because people are working from home and it's easy to just continue to work. But I just wanted to make sure that, you know, it's not a hard stop. People need to, you know, take their best work ethic forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Kayla? Not seeing any. I'll call the question. Is anyone opposed to this motion? Did I get a mover and seconder for that, Lindsay? I don't think I did. No, I did not. Sorry about that.
And I apologize as well because I should have caught that, but I'm looking now and I don't have anything wrote. So
Okay.
I can move it. I was pretty sure
All right,
I moved that already, but
all right. Anybody want to second it?
I'll second it, Brian.
All right, thanks, Jason. So we have the motion moved and seconded. Be it resolved, the council will receive the staff report, that council approve the draft policy disconnect, and that council consider approval of this policy number 92 by municipal bylaw at the June 1st council meeting. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, I'll call the question. Is anyone opposed to that? No opposition. That is carried. Thank you very much, Kayla. That is, I believe that's all your reports for today. Anyway, thank you. Okay, good. We have a closed meeting. The closed meeting procedure was forwarded by the clerk. So we will see you over on the other side. Oh, what's up, Madam Clerk? Oh, we need a motion to go in closed session.
yes,
Good thing you put your hand in the air. Every time you do that, I know, oh, I got to do something. All right. Be it resolved, the council proceed into closed session at 4:04 in order to address matters related to litigation or potential litigation, subject council decision related to the proposal for cost award submission by the township's lawyer, verbal report, and that Clerk Lindsay Green, Chief Building Official Bev Fisher, Public Works Manager Jim Ellis, and CEO Dave Milner remain in attendance. Moved by Martin, thank you. Seconded by Barb, thank you. Anyone opposed to going in closed session for those matters? Not hearing any opposition, I'll declare that carried. Now, we'll see you on the other side. Thank you.
Councillor Rice, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Yep.
Perfect.
Lindsay, do you have a motion prepared coming out of closed session?
I do, yes.
Excellent. I didn't even have to ask. I knew you would.
I think we're good. We have 4, which is quorum. Councillor Shearson texted and said he won't be returning, so.
Okay. So, Lindsay, do you, I can confirm that council only discussed those matters which we went into closed session to discuss. Do we need anything beyond? Go ahead.
Nope,
No,
thanks, Deputy Mayor Milne. I'll just read the motion coming out of closed session.
Thank you.
Be it resolved that council receive the verbal report regarding council's decision related to the proposal for cost award submissions by the township's lawyer as information.
Could someone move that motion, please? Martin, seconded by Barb. Thank you very much. Any discussion, or is anyone opposed to that motion? No opposition. That is carried. We have a confirming bylaw, as always. Would someone care to move that confirming bylaw, please?
I'll move it, Brian.
Thank you, Jason. Seconded. Martin, thank you. Anyone opposed to that motion? Madam Clerk, you're
Recorded.
opposed to that? Oh, that's a recorded vote. Right, right. Go ahead, Madam Clerk, take the poll, please. We haven't had one all day. We might as well have one now, right?
Oh, thank you, Deputy Mayor Milne. So a recorded vote called for the confirming bylaw. Councillor Dobreen?
In favor.
Councillor Shearson is absent. Councillor Frew is absent. Deputy Mayor Milne?
Yay.
Mayor Woodbury is absent. Councillor Rice?
Yes.
Councillor Shipston?
Yes.
By a vote of 4-0, that's carried.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And because we have completed the agenda, I will declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you all for your time and your input. It's been a long day, but hey, staff does this every day. Thank you very much, all.
Have a
Take care.
good evening, everyone.
My
Have a good evening.
staff. Good night.